Welcome to our video compilation. We've documented everything from touching moments to thrilling trips. Whether you're looking for motivation or simply a good chuckle, this video has you covered. So sit back, relax, and take in the highlights of the previous week. Remember to like and subscribe. Story 1. Not sure if this falls under that, but my best childhood friend did something pretty bad to someone else in high school, and that led to me blowing up my circle of friends. There was a girl. She came from a broken, abusive, everything is fine on the surface, rich family. She had some problems with anorexia, depression, and PTSD. She had also been debauched by an ex-boyfriend who is not otherwise part of this story. So this girl made a new friend in high school. We shall call this friend POS, for piece of junk. POS was a good friend of my best friend. I'd hung out with him a few times, but we were just friends. The girl came to trust POS, and eventually she told him all her dark secrets and pains and regrets. POS pretended to offer her support, then turned around and told his friends all her secrets because he enjoyed gossiping and being the center of attention. He also told them not to let it get back to her because then she would stop telling him secrets. One of the people he told was my best friend, and he told me, and that wasn't right. I told the girl everything I knew. Me, some random guy she had only met once before, knowing intimate details about her horrible family life, the stuff about her ex, her eating disorder, everything. She was obviously horrified and felt very betrayed by POS. So she confronted him very loudly and publicly. The most drama I've ever heard of in real life. A lot of people already knew her secrets, so I guess she felt she didn't have much to lose. Anyway, POS went into damage control mode and tried to spin it as me manipulating the girl to get into her pants, and only making her think I knew all those things. Some people believed him, some believed her. My best friend felt that I had betrayed him and sided with POS. This also made it hard to get along when we met up with the same circle of friends. So the end result was my circle of friends somewhat breaking up in the last semester of high school. I missed my formerly best friend for a while. I have never found anyone else with a sense of humor so similar to mine. But ultimately, I couldn't have not told that girl what was happening, and the fact that my friend treated it as just juicy gossip, I guess he wasn't a very good person. I'm not perfect myself, and I certainly regret the price I had to pay for that story, but I did the right thing. If I could go back, I wouldn't change that. I wouldn't be me if I had stood by and let that continue. That is a very harsh choice to make. I mean, think about that. If there was something you knew was the right thing to do, but you knew it would destroy the friends you have about you, the ones that you see every day, the ones that you rely on, not just work friends or casual friends, just the deep ones, would you still do what's right? Maybe you find another solution, but if this was the only way, would you do it? Story 2. I was dating a guy for about a month and told my best friend all about him and how much I liked him. My friend and I had tickets to a music festival, and the guy decided at the last minute he was going to come also because he liked some of the bands that were there. Went to the festival, had a great time, and got an Uber back to an Airbnb we had rented for the weekend. Walking in, the guy I was dating went to the room we were sleeping in to lay down. I go into the kitchen to get water, hear a guy yelling my name, walk in on my best friend on top of a guy straddling him. Uncomfortable confirmation ensues. I don't ever comment on anything ever, so this is new for me. For that reason, I gave you the most condensed version I could while trying to have the story still make sense. This happened a year ago. My friend and I had been friends for 9 years. There were a lot of comments about the drinking, and I agree it's not her main issue, and all the drinking does is make her issues worse. My immediate reaction after I walked in the room, because the guy was calling my name, asking for me to come help him, when I saw her on top of him, was shocking, and I was instantly furious with the two of them. Also, they both had clothes on. I said something along the lines of, "I don't know what the frick is going on, but I am not okay with this, and I'm not sure how either of you think it's okay either." She immediately got off of him, mumbled, "I'm sorry," and retreated to her room and passed out. I started packing my stuff and said I was leaving because at that point I was so angry I was done with both of them. Guy talked to me for almost an hour afterwards, confused why I was mad at him, and eventually, when I calmed down, realized he didn't do anything wrong. She came into his room unsolicited and called for me to come back the moment it got out of hand. I didn't talk to her for months afterwards. She contacted me and asked why I was being distant. I explained what happened. She didn't remember it, or she claimed, or so she claimed. It's taken a long time, but we're still friends. I've created more distance between us. We don't hang out as much, and I know now she's someone I can't fully trust. As for me and the guy, we've been dating now for 10 months. I was actually kind of surprised that she's still dating the guy. I actually kind of thought that she would just break it off with both of them. It's good that they've got a deeper relationship. Maybe that's the one that's going to lead to something that's more lasting. Who knows if they're going to get married or not. And as far as still being friends with the other person, it seems like she's laying down the boundaries, and she still has some value for her in her life, just not as much as previously was. Story 3. I had one very close friend who was never exactly a laid-back guy because he was very ambitious. I think he saw himself destined for greater things, which was never a problem. I mean, I'm an Asperger's, and I know that I'm a bit different and strange sometimes as well, so we went through thick and thin together and helped each other through rough times. But then he decided to become a banker, and he became increasingly distant. Then he became an employee of the German central bank, and that was when things went really downhill. I drove a couple 100 kilometers on his birthday, hoping for a fun time. It was not. He had a party, and I felt completely out of place. From his old friends, only 2 were invited, anyway, and the rest were his new fancy banker friends. And then we caught him making apologies to them for us, because we came in casual clothing, not in suits that cost half of a month's salary, because we were laid back and were making jokes, because we told stories about our former adventures. He explained to them that he grew out of that and that he had grown up, while we apparently would still need time to find our way. He felt embarrassed. Because of us, apparently a nurse and a geologist were beneath his dignity. Next time we met, he acted like nothing happened and was back to his old self. But after a quite relaxed time, he became a bit nervous and tried to get rid of us with all kinds of excuses. This was explained when one of his banker friends joined the scene. Apparently, they wanted to go out for an evening in town, but we were not good enough anymore to stay around. So I've directly asked him if he felt embarrassed for us. He looked away and said nothing. And that was the end of our friendship. Classicists are weird. How was he planning on trying? It sounds like he was trying to maintain 2 different types of friendships. His old friends and his new ones. But kind of poorly, too. Did he think that his old friends would just brush off getting apologized for? I don't know how he was planning to keep this up. It's kind of tragic that he was trying to hold on to both. I think if he wanted to go this route and he was going to react this way with his old friends, he should have just let go. Maybe at least then there would have been some honest communication. Story 4. My friend who has large boobs, mine are just barely D's, Butcher's were bigger, grabbed my then-boyfriend's head, yelled, "Look at my boobs, you know you want to," and rubbed his face into her cleavage. She was sober. She just had a self-esteem issue that made her need every guy in the room to want to smash her more than the other girls. She also knew that I was a bit insecure when it came to her because they'd slept together before he and I dated, and I wondered if my then-boyfriend wanted her more than he wanted me because she'd been the one to drop him. Several months later, she would text him things to initiate dirty texts, then get him to break up with me so they could sleep together because she was single and wanted to get laid and he happened to be around. An awful thing for her to do, but you probably also don't want a man who'll drop you at the drop of a hat because a pair of boobs came beckoning for a one-night stand. Story 1. 4 friends reunited at a party after 30 years. After a few laughs and drinks, one of them had to go to the restroom. The ones who stayed behind began to talk about their kids and their successes. The first guy says, "I'm very proud of my son. He's my pride and joy. He started working at a very successful company at the bottom of the barrel. He studied economics, business administration, and was promoted, began to climb the corporate ladder, becoming the general manager, and now he's the president of the company. He became so rich that he gave his best friend a top-of-the-line Mercedes-Benz for his birthday." The second guy says, "Dang, that's terrific. My son is also my pride and joy. I'm very proud of him. He started working at a traveling agency for a very big airline. He went to flight school to become a pilot and managed to become a partner in the company where he now owns the majority of the assets. He became so rich that he gave his best friend a brand new jet for his birthday." The third guy says, Well, congratulations. My son is also my pride and joy, and he's also very rich. He studied at the best universities and became an engineer. He started his own construction company and became very successful and a multi-millionaire. He also gave away some very nice and expensive things to his best friend for his birthday. He built a 30,000 square foot mansion especially for his friend." The 3 friends congratulated each other, not mutually, for the successes of their sons. The 4th friend, who earlier had gone to the restroom, returned and asked, "What's going on? What are all the congratulations for?" One of the 3 said, "Well, we're talking about the pride we feel for the successes of our sons. What about your son?" Well, the 4th man replied, "Well, my son is gay, and he makes a living dancing as a stripper at a nightclub." The 3 friends said, "What a shame that must be. That's horrible. What a disappointment you must feel." The 4th man replied, "No, I'm not ashamed. Not at all. He's my son, and I love him just as well. He is my pride and joy. In addition, he's very lucky, too. Did you know that his birthday just passed, and the other day he received a beautiful 30,000 square foot mansion, a brand new jet, and a top-of-the-line Mercedes from his 3 boyfriends?" This sounds like some Facebook joke that a lame person would share. I knew as soon as I read the first lines of this that it was a joke. I've heard this one before. This one is a little bit more sanitized. I think the other versions I've heard of this joke sort of prey on being gay being something to be shameful for. It focuses more on the shame of being gay rather than being a gold digger. But I don't know. What do you think about this version of the joke? Story 2. All right, I'm in. I'm not a gold digger. I did marry a lawyer, but she's underpaid, works for the family firm. Anyway, that's not the story. My dad is a gold digger ever since he cheated on my mom and she threw him out. Soon after he and my mom split, he met this lady who came from some big Las Vegas money. I'm talking millions here. Houses in Las Vegas, Malibu, Catalina, and some ski resort in Utah. He was struggling to get his business off the ground at the time. They met, fell in love, and she began funding his business. Over the next 14 years, My dad ran a fairly successful business, making good money and having elite clientele who had big money. He was living that lifestyle. They took many extravagant vacations to Europe from the U.S., annual ski trips, quarterly trips to the island, and had the taste for all things fancy. All of this, of course, I was rarely invited. Nearing the 15-year mark of their relationship, my dad and his lady, whom never married each other, just life partners, started having relationship problems. I heard through the family grapevine that she had been faking orgasms for the entirety of the relationship, but she was too embarrassed to bring it up. Obviously, my dad, being the stud that he is, was completely offended and started getting weird. I found this to be hilarious because he always bragged to me about the women in his life and how many women wanted him. Fast forward a couple of months, they decide to split their relationship. My dad, a complete moron, had bought a house with this lady, but put it in her name. Guess who kept the house? She did. About a month after the split, my dad's business began to suffer, bills pile up, and clients slowly stop calling. About half a year later, he closes the doors to his business, and that's that. Now, after living abroad for a few years, he's back with his usual habits. He's with this woman who has plenty of her own money, and he's glomming onto her with a new business idea, which I'm sure she'll be funding. Didn't expect to hear a story about a man gold digger before. I mean, of course, they exist. I'm not denying that. But, man, you would think that they would decide to save something just in case of emergencies. But, of course, if they're living this lifestyle, they probably weren't thinking about that. If you had the opportunity to get funded, would you go on expensive trips, or would you sock some stuff away for an emergency? Story 3. I'm not the parent, but the child of a gold digger. My dad was educated exclusively at private schools and elite Ivy League education. He got his master's in finance by age 24. He's from a politically connected family and could be making millions on Wall Street. Instead, he took much lower-paying jobs in order to help raise me and my brother. My mom has her degree in art history. She dumped her previous fiancé and met my dad while out celebrating that she'd dumped her old flame. They got married, and within 9 years were divorced. I constantly heard them fight about how my father wouldn't give her some spending money. He repeatedly told her if she'd like to spend money, that she had a degree and could earn her own. That was not acceptable to her, so they got divorced. Within 2 years, my mom was remarried to a doctor and quit the job she had since doctors' wives don't work. Within 3 months, the marriage fell apart. Throughout my upbringing, my mother constantly beat it into me and my brother's skull that you should always have the finest things, never settle. She would make comments in private about how people didn't always look their finest. This was in spite of the fact she refused to work a job that's beneath her. To my mom, how something makes her look is infinitely more important than anything else. Her newest fiancé is awesome, and he's the VP of a branch of banks. She spins this as, he's the VP of a bank. She would always brag about where her husbands, at the time, were educated. My brother works in business too, and she spins this as he's a consultant who has clients in Manhattan, Toronto, etc. I work at a bakery doing hourly level tasks. She tells her friends, my youngest works as a baker making organic high-end bagels. Despite earning into the 6 figures, she somehow never has any money, yet just bought a new BMW. My mom is both a gold digger and a freaking snob. Dude, I hate your mom. But I do love bagels, so you're all right by me. I remember a movie called Amazon Women on the Moon. It was one of those sketch comedy movies. One of the first sketches was about a woman who was asking for a potential date's ID so she could run his personality through this database to keep track of this guy's past dating life. It's very prescient for nowadays, but it sounds like this person, whoever dates this woman, would benefit from that kind of a system, which I'm pretty sure we have nowadays. I think it's called the internet and Facebook and stuff. Story 4. I haven't seen this guy for a few years, but an old friend of mine started out as a gold digger with his girlfriend. He started dating her 4 years ago because he found out that she was rich. The dude came from a broken home with some really messed up parents. He also had ADHD as well as a couple other learning disabilities. Quit high school in grade 11, but started dating her shortly before that. Her dad was filthy freaking rich, as he had a lot to do with the mines in the area, CEO in a huge mining town. He was seemingly mooching at first, didn't go to work, didn't do anything but drink and do substances with his girlfriend. More than once I heard that the father was going to kick him out, but was persuaded by his little girl not to. He eventually falls for the girl and not the money, and decides to take it upon himself to change. Out of nowhere, he says, "I want a job. I don't care what it is," to the girl's dad, and her dad puts him to work. Now, when I knew him, he was famous for his work ethic and intensive labor jobs. Dude was like the dang Energizer Bunny. He worked his butt off, earned his promotions, went back and finished high school, completed 2 trades, and the 2 of them bought a house together. To my knowledge, he rarely drinks and hasn't touched substances since he started working. I was pretty surprised because when I went to school with him, he caused nothing but trouble. I really like this story. Thanks for sharing. Story 1. I was a kid and my sister was much older when my parents were finally done with her. From my recollection, she went through the cycle of making one stupid decision after another, even when they would tell her and show her why she shouldn't make that decision. Dropped out of college they were paying for, and used the tuition money she was refunded to buy a Firebird, then quit her job. Let the car run out of oil, kept driving it until the engine seized up. Parents bailed her out again, buying her what they could afford on one salary, a decent used station wagon. Only catch, she take the job my dad called in favors for. Parents come home one day to find strange car in driveway, a Sunbird. It was old and junky, but it was a 1-to-1 trade my sister managed to swing on the station wagon. Lo and behold, old and junky car breaks down almost immediately, and she simply stops showing up to work, gets fired. Moves out with no car and no job, accusing parents of controlling her life. Moves back in 3 months later. Upset that I've moved into her old bedroom, which is bigger, demands to be moved back into the bigger bedroom. Parents say no. She threatens to move out. She goes on a semi-hunger strike about the bedroom. Turns out she was shoplifting and stockpiling candy to eat so she wouldn't have to eat with the rest of the family. During this time, dates a number of less than stellar boyfriends, including a guy who is 30 years older but drives a Porsche, a guy who had been convicted of sexual abuse, and another guy who generally creeps everyone out by jumping the fence and just standing in the backyard at all hours of the night. Eventually, she's told to pay rent, go to college, or move out. She chooses to move out and is gone by the end of the week. I clearly remember her threatening to burn the house down as she left. 2 months later, she asks to move back in because her roommate and best friend kicked her out. Parents say no, she's on her own unless she wants to go to college or get a job and keep it. Car breaks down again for good and calls and asks parents if they can buy a new one for her. Not new as in new to her, New as in brand new model year. My parents' newest car was 15 years old at the time. They say no, and not to call again. There was a whole raft of other things too, including forgetting to pick up her grandmother from doctor's appointments, generally loathing the existence of the rest of her family, and then, ironically, deriding the family as rednecks when she finally managed to hook a guy who was a small business owner and actually had some money. Anywho, it's been about 20 years since I've spoken to her, and from the stuff I hear now, and again through the pipeline, I'm better for it. I do expect her to come calling when my parents pass and she finds out I'm the sole heir. Another guy who generally creeps everyone out by jumping the fence and just standing in the backyard at all hours of the night? Your sister dated Michael Myers. I was about to say maybe this was just something about personalities clashing with the sister and the parents, but it seems like other people just didn't care for her as well. Her best friend kicking her out? And what's with the focus on cars? I mean, what did this other guy do that she finally managed to nab? Was he doing something in car dealerships or something? I guess she just really wanted to have the nice cars, but just didn't want to take care of them. Anyway, story 2. Other way around. My father had this incredible stupid shrew as a wife. She is just terrible. She left him, owned me quite a bit of money, cheated on my father, and on and on. After 3 years of marriage, she's around 36 and my father is 50. He did everything for her, and she just made him miserable, but he kept going. When she left my father, he became really, really depressed, and I cared for him. Hoping that he would get over the whole situation, etc. We even fought the whole divorce together. He got better and everything. I was really happy for him. Then came the day that she had no money left, and she came back to my father. He told me about it, and I was so angry that he didn't learn from the story before. I told him that I didn't want to see her ever again, and I won't do anything with him if she was there as well. The day came when my father and I wanted to meet for lunch. As I arrived, I saw her sitting there with him. I went to the place and said that she had to leave or I'm going to leave. He became mad, and for that, I left. He tried to do the same move again. I had told him to take off and never spoke to him again. I never trusted this woman. It became better, and then I found out about her cheating, lying, and everything. She told me to take off when I wanted my money back. I won't trust her ever again, but I can't help my dad. I told him everything, and he's still blind through those love curtains. Sounds like my dad. He will stick up for my narcissistic mother until he's blue in the face. I went no contact with her, but told him that he could come and visit me and his, at the time, newborn granddaughter any time he wanted. Nope. Wouldn't do it without my mom. It eventually got to the point where it became a lost cause, and I realized we'll never have a relationship as long as Mom is alive. That is such a heartbreaking statement to have to say. I'm not knocking that she realizes that this person is awful. I'm not saying that. It's just that it comes down to that. Do any of you out there have a relative or even a parent that you've gone no contact with? What was the reason you had for that? Story 3. I'm not a parent. I've never disowned a child. My parents disowned my oldest sister. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. My oldest sister had a horrible relationship with my father, blames me for getting in the way of their relationship. She had her first baby to spite him when she was 16 years old. My father refused to give her money because she met a deadbeat child predator and got pregnant again, then again, and again. She constantly put herself in deadbeat before kids. Dad would send money to girls for Christmas and birthdays and never heard a thing. He finally gave up. She's 30, has 6 daughters, and lives in a mobile home in North Carolina. We hadn't seen or heard from my sister until June of this year. My oldest niece contacted me asking to come to Florida, where I live, for the summer to get her and her sisters out of the trailer. I agree, contact sister, and she agrees. I set up plane tickets and organize the rooms they'll stay in. When they got here, they were completely disheveled, clothes visibly dirty, smelled foul, so covered in lice that my white towels stained gray from removing them. My niece informed me that they had been without water and electricity for 6 months. They live in a 2-bedroom mobile home. There are holes in the roof, bugs and rats everywhere. As a family, we decide the girls aren't going back to North Carolina. We tell my sister to come to my parents' house in Florida to get her life together and get back on her feet. She refused because Deadbeat is not invited. Ironically, she found out that Deadbeat is cheating on her. She confronts him, and he kicks her out of Junkhole Trailer. Deadbeat said, "I would rather be homeless than live with you." Sister now works for the dollar store and doesn't pull her weight with kids. At least the girls are safe now. Your oldest niece is a smart girl to contact you. You're a kind soul to agree and open your heart. Wow, that was just completely tragic, and it was amazing that they were able to find the space for this girl's daughters and take care of her. I'm just sad that she just still isn't able to pull her own weight. Do you think she'll able to get back on her feet and be able to start pulling her weight? Maybe she's not making any money at this dollar store to be able to help out. Do you think there's any chance she'll be able to get back on her feet? Story 1. I work for a car dealership, so it's a little different from the typical office, but most of our days are pretty similar to an office job, so here goes. 1. We had this salesman named Dave, older guy, seemed really nice and everyone liked him, but none of us really trusted him for some reason. One day, he randomly walked up to the manager and said he had to go to a doctor's appointment. He's sorry for the short notice, but mixed up the dates on his calendar. He was a reliable employee, so the boss let him go. 10 minutes later, a state trooper walked in, accompanied by a bounty hunter carrying a full set of shackles. The ones with the handcuffs and leg irons and a chain connecting the two. They asked for Dave. We told him he said he was going to the doctor's, and no, we didn't know where that was. They took off looking for him. Now, when Dave left, he was driving one of the used cars off the lot. We were wondering if we'd ever get the car back. Sure enough, 3 days later, we get a call. They'd found the car abandoned with the keys in the ignition in a mall parking lot 200 miles away, undamaged. We never did hear from Dave again, nor find out why they were after him. Googling his name brings up nothing, so we're assuming he was using a false identity. 2. Sitting at my desk one day, I smelled poop. That wasn't an uncommon occurrence, as many of our salespersons didn't have the best diet and sometimes would crop dust the showroom as they walked through. The poop smell got a bit more intense, and I thought, wow, someone really went to town on the Taco Bell last night. I got up from my desk and walked to the other side of a car parked in the showroom and noticed a trail of brown spots on the floor across the showroom, spaced out the same distance as footsteps. So my thought then was that some farmer had come in. We were close to a pretty country area, and tracked mud all through the building. Also not an uncommon occurrence. It was only then that I put two and two together. It was not a trail of mud and some nasty farts. It was a trail of poop, all the way across the length of the showroom and down the hall to the bathroom. Turns out some guy in our service waiting room pooped himself and then walked to the bathroom with the poop dropping out of his pant legs every time he took a step. Our manager went into the restroom to see if he was all right, and he said it looked like a chocolate cake exploded. Poop everywhere, all over the floor, on the walls, you name it. Our manager was a good guy and tried to keep things as polite as possible in a situation like this. He pulled the guy's car out of the shop, put plastic on the seats and floor, and parked it right at the door next to the bathrooms. Then quickly ushered the guy out and into his car so he could go home and clean himself up. And that's the first story I've got to read today, or at least one of them. Ugh. It's good of this person, it's good of the manager to put plastic on the car to try and minimize the damage to the car. Ugh. I don't know if any of you have ever had any experiences like that where you've had an unfortunate adult accident like that. I'm trying to remember. Even if I remembered an incident like that, I'm not telling you guys. Sorry. Nope. Story 2. I worked with a complete train wreck. She had no social skills and was incredibly needy. The office was an hour from her trailer, but she didn't want to move closer because the city was too ethnic. She invited strange men she met online to meet her at her home and would occasionally let them sleep over and spend the day with her 11-year-old daughter the next day if school was out. Daughter was eventually removed when one of the internet boyfriends impregnated her. Coworker went to court to fight for custody reinstatement because she couldn't pay her bills without the child support. Ended up in jail for contempt after the judge said no. Some of her office greatest hits? Thought it was appropriate to announce to any coworkers, regardless of age or seniority, that she never wore underwear. Frequently wore stretched thin white leggings which let everyone know without a shadow of a doubt that she wasn't kidding. Would aggressively harass the owner of the company, who was only on site a few times a year for official visits for free company swag. He had the good grace not to humiliate her, but everyone else wanted to crawl into a hole. Outed a gay contractor to the entire building, including gossiping about all the intimate details of their planned adoption. People didn't know she wasn't supposed to be sharing the info and bought baby gifts. The adoption fell through after the baby was born, and the contractor had to deal with returning them and finding out he'd been outed in the process. She didn't see how she'd done anything wrong. Developed an obsession over an employee who lost some company property when he fell asleep at a girl's house. Instead of working, she appointed herself to track down the alleged thief online by illegally accessing databases we were only allowed to use for specific work reasons. Employee was fired for multiple reasons, including all the women who kept calling his company's cell looking for a booty call, and she continued to defend him and his innocence. Told black jokes to a summer intern and didn't see why she'd done anything wrong or why the intern quit. One day she came into work with a huge hickey on her neck and didn't know until her supervisor asked her to cover it up. She called her lay of the week from her desk phone and yelled at him loudly, insisting this never would have happened if he'd kept his teeth in. Oh, that is worth a read right there. Ugh. Usually it is stories about men being inappropriate in the workplace. This woman, there's several ways to describe this woman. She's a busybody. She has no filter. She is just unemotional to anybody else. She's just a Karen, but just doesn't care about anyone else. Well, that's what a Karen is, but just doesn't care about the consequences. Only when things happen to her. Anyway, story 3. I have one. We have an agent. Let's call him Joe. Joe is about 60 and the perfect employee. Never misses work, perfect stats, honest, customers love him and always give him praise. Volunteers for overtime, and absolutely everybody loves him. I use his calls as examples in my training class. He has been offered numerous management positions, but is perfectly content sitting at home, fixing customers' problems, making them happy, and making our company money. He is an absolute machine. 2 years ago, his wife and his 40th wedding anniversary was coming up, and I had a business trip to Ohio for a new system training. Joe was told he had to come with me to learn. He pleaded he couldn't because he would miss his wedding anniversary. Plus, it was odd because agents never go on trips. And my manager said sternly, "Do it, Joe. You don't have a choice." Joe, of course, went home and packed and got ready to leave a few days later. His wife said she was going to stay with her sisters while he was gone and left the night before. Our company car picked me up for the airport, and we headed to Joe's. He was pretty upset and depressed, but trying to be upbeat. We went to dinner and stalled for a few hours, for good reason, and when we got to the airport, we boarded our plane and headed to Houston for a switch. We got to Houston, and we walked up to the Miami gate, and I said, "There's your plane." He looked at me, and I pointed over to his wife, standing at the gate. My boss had arranged to send them to Miami for a week, and then on a cruise to Jamaica for their anniversary with my boss's company credit card for expenses. The first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh my gosh, I didn't pack for that." But of course, we had his wife take care of that when we sent her out for an earlier flight. He started crying right there in the airport and hugged me. I handed him the credit card, went over and gave his wife a hug and told her she owed me some apple cookies. So bomb. And headed to my plane for Ohio. Went to Ohio and, yeah, Ohio. That's so awesome. Admire your boss for 2 reasons. 1, obviously sending a deserving guy out on the trip, but 2, his commitment to trolling was awesome. Sending him out on a connecting flight first is just A+ stuff. I'd work for this man gladly. Well, I'm glad this employee was recognized for this. With all the stories we hear these days about bosses not caring about employees or their jobs, it's glad to see a story like this and just to see someone that is living up to something that deserves such a spectacular trip. I can't think of any company now that would ever do anything like this for one of their employees, even if they were as exceptional as Joe is. Story 1. My dad is as much of a narcissist as it gets. I didn't realize that it was abnormal until I moved out of the house and out of state. When I finally came back, I remembered him calling me one day to tell me to give him $10 because he claimed he needed to grab something to eat. "Sorry, but I don't have $10 to give you." "You don't have $10 to give your dad? Come on, I'll pay you right back. I just need it to go down to the store so I can eat." "I don't have it, so you'll have to put on your big boy pants and make some money for yourself." "Well, I was going to ask your sister, but I don't want to ask her because she's my daughter, you know." I hung up after that. A few minutes later, he calls me and says, "Hey, your sister just sent me the $10. See, it wasn't that hard." A couple months later, I heard that he was still asking my sister for money, And then, on my sister and my brother-in-law's anniversary, he called and basically blew her up over the phone when she said no, to the point where she was crying, on that day of all days. And then he finally said, "So you're just gonna let your dad freeze to death outside tonight?" My brother-in-law told him not to ever call them again, and I haven't heard from him since. He honestly thinks he's super popular and a good person, but he isn't. I blocked his number and want nothing to do with him anymore. Back to the question, though, it's really weird because you end up growing to either be just like them or completely the opposite. I've had to grow up on my own and not be able to have a father figure to show me how to be a man and make smart decisions or how to be a leader of a household. These are things that I think many people take for granted and don't fully realize how great they have it by having both parents in the house and have them not be completely focused on themselves. I always envy the people that still get to live with their parents into their 20s. I moved out when I was 18, and I'm almost 30 now, and I wish every day that I had the ability to still live at home and not have to worry about rent, utilities, car payments, insurance, gas, phone, internet, etc. You're right about the growing up like or opposite. I'm getting worried because both my parents are freaking sick, and while I'm cutting contact once I'm out, my brother is beginning to act like my mom. It's sad to watch. Part of it is me being proud that this person decided to move out on their own and decided to learn how to be independent, or figured that out on his own. I wonder what he did while he was living under their roof. It sounds like if he had gotten a job or something, his dad would have demanded that he give him all the money. I don't know if that's true or not, but sometimes things just make more sense once you get out of the house and you start to see things through your own eyes. Story 2. My sociopathic older, 3.5 years, and I shared a bedroom growing up. I slept on my stomach with my head under the pillow and my stuffed animals on both sides because she would beat me in my sleep. She would lock me in our old dilapidated spider-infested shed instead of babysitting me. She would invite me to hang with her and her friends. All I wanted was to be included in our room. Everyone would be really nice to me for like 5 minutes before my sister would snap and beat the living hell out of me while her friends laughed. They bullied me all day, every day. I was sweeping the kitchen one afternoon, and she walked in, snatched the broom out of my hands, and proceeded to beat me with it. Telephone receivers, tennis rackets, soccer cleats, and hairbrushes were her weapon of choice. Once, when I was 18, I still lived at home, and she lived a couple miles away. I just got off work, and she showed up at my parents' and invited me to hang out at her place and told me to bring my weed. Knowing she was just using me, I told her I was tired and didn't want to go anywhere. She left, and about an hour later, I left to get a pack of smokes. As I'm driving down my parents' street away from their house, I see my sister barreling down the street towards me. Needless to say, she plowed right into me, totaled my car. Currently, my mother, my brother, his partner, his ex-wife, and her husband, and my 18-year-old niece all have restraining orders against my now 44-year-old sister. She's been banned from grocery stores and other public places for her explosive, I'm just being honest, tirades on other customers. She was arrested for assaulting one of the aforementioned family members, and as the cops were putting the cuffs on her, she said, "I should have curb-stomped the shrew." Side note, my dad bails her out of every legal situation she's ever been in, so she has never been held accountable for her behavior. She literally believes laws exist for other people and not her. She is a narcissistic sociopath, according to all the mental health providers I have seen over the last 25 years. That is scary. This person seems like they need mental health, the older one, but the person telling the story is the one that has seen mental health providers. Just no accountability whatsoever? You gotta wonder what's going through the dad's mind when he's bailing out this person. Does no one have any? Does the dad have a restraining order against her? It doesn't look like it in the story. I guess she's just the lifeline, and if he passes away, I think there's nothing protecting her. Story 4. 2-year divorce/custody battle. I was a faithful, happy, and devoted husband and father. Gave up my music and my small business to stay home with our child by her request. She displayed great emotional and mental abuse and instability prior to our child's birth, was prescribed meds, which helped greatly, but went off when our child was conceived and never went back on. My goal was to protect him as much as possible. She got worse and worse again. She started a relationship and affair with another coworker, someone she hired, and hatched a plan to destroy me. Had me arrested, kicked out, left me with no money, job, vehicle, home, and told the court I was an abuser, neglectful of our child, an alcoholic, stole and wasted family funds, etc., etc., etc. Without the court's involvement, she had his education and medical block me. I have access now. Son developed bad asthma, and she hid it. He was prescribed 2 inhalers and only gave me 1. When I tried to get in touch with his education and medical, she claims I'm harassing them and causing problems. I went through 4 months supervised visitation for 1 hour a week, 2 Child Protective Services investigations. No case was ever opened. I have my sons overnight on a more regular schedule now. She still won't settle and still wants sole custody. She took out a $120,000 loan out on our apartment a year ago without my approval or court's knowledge, and they put it in equity. I brought in a forensic psych who tested us and said that my test showed I was too well adjusted, and therefore I must be in denial, and hers said she's prone to persecutory behavior and ideas and histrionics. I've done nothing but complied with everything, given her every olive branch, and all she does is take and accuse. She told the forensic we had a nanny, no proof, and no we didn't, and that I pled guilty to the charges. I didn't, and they were dropped by the court. She told the doctor our child's preschool couldn't hold or administer his medication, but I have a recording of them saying they could and do. Narcissistic personality disorder. Story 5. Sister is a narcissist. Used to threaten me and say generally mean things when we were little. That progressed to her telling lies to get me punished as we got older, and then just being manipulative and trying to use anything to get people to feel sorry for her. My younger sisters used to get called fat and told that everybody in the family was embarrassed by them. They were 8 and 13 years younger than this sister, so she was picking on a 10 and 5-year-old when she left for college. Her parents have enabled her in doing this for years by telling us other kids that we just had to learn to ignore her comments and rarely ever reprimanded her for being a shrew. She's almost 50 years old now and still acts the same way, but we don't have to deal with her when we don't want to because she still tries to divide the family, and she has the best luck with me since she's the oldest and more favored. I recall the time I loaned her something, and she came to me and claimed someone else broke it. I knew how this would go. She would claim that since she didn't break it, she wasn't responsible, and her mother would agree and Dad would follow Mom, and I'd be cheated out of my present that I'd just gotten a couple weeks ago before, so I told the superintendent at school since it was supposedly broken at school. We got home, and she whined and complained to the parents, and when she was done, Dad came into my room and ripped my butt with, "You don't go dragging our personal lives out in public, and we'll handle this stuff at home," and never took the 2 seconds to ask my side of the story, which just enforced my belief of how it was going to go. My mom then came in and told me that social life was different in high school, and I was in the wrong. Curse them. Curse them indeed. You deserve better. Family isn't anything sometimes. Story 1. This happened this week. In February, a new maintenance tech was hired for my properties. Good guy. Shows up early, gets everything done. I would frequently catch him skipping lunch to get more work done and tell him to go take his full hour. I'd go fetch him a burrito, or if he wasn't hungry, tell him to take a nap in his truck. He's got 3 kids, and he's always on call for maintenance emergencies. He comes in one day and asks me to show him his timesheet, which I fill out and sign. I pull it out, worried I'd made some mistake. We compare it to his pay stub. He was underpaid by over 16 hours, in addition to 7 hours of overtime he never got anything for. This overtime has been pre-approved by corporate. I call corporate, he calls corporate. We all call everybody trying to get this fixed, and people just pass us off to the next guy and the next guy. My maintenance guy comes in early one morning, catching me working early too, and says nervously that he thinks he knows why they aren't paying him right. He'd let them know his green card was about to expire and he'd need sponsorship or something, I don't know how the process works, to renew it. He said after that, they stopped paying him in full. They tried to make him sign a retroactive salary agreement that would cut off all the earnings above. I drove to corporate to get this sorted once and for all and spoke to the person who was supposedly in charge of maintenance's paychecks, my boss's assistant. I laid out what was going on and that this couldn't be extended any longer. She needed to call maintenance right now and get it fixed right now. She promised she would. Weeks later, maintenance has called her every day with no response. I met with my boss and brought up this issue, insisting he be paid. My boss wasn't the least bit interested in getting him paid, but laid out how it's my responsibility and my fault if he takes the company to court. It's me who'll be in trouble. I told her how I'd submitted the correct timesheet on time and the pay didn't match. I told her about the daily phone calls. I called in her assistant, who entered pale as snow and stuttered that she'd never heard anything about it. My boss declined to pay the maintenance tech, stating it was my problem now. I have no ability to pay anyone. I'm not in charge of payroll. I don't even get petty cash. Apparently, I was going to be used as their liability sink after they refused to pay an employee. That's when I quit. 2 days ago. They said for my final month's pay, they're sending me a check for $6.67. Contact the labor department in your area. That's awful. There's just no loyalty from this company at all. And it's too bad that this person got caught into this maintenance person's job. Who was really good at their job, apparently. And just because of a green card, they were going to stiff him on pay? It's awful. Story 2. I was hired at age 12 to start work in the family business. I worked my way up from doing basically coffee runs to knowing more than all the guys I worked with. I trained people who would then be paid double my salary because someday all this will be yours and this is what they call paying your dues, my dad said. I worked every day after school. I worked on the weekends. I never had a summer off, never had a full Christmas or any other holiday. I was told to work hard and someday. I wanted to go to university, and although I was told it would be covered, silly me, I must have misread the bulletin. There was no cash for me to go. But Dad somehow was able to go big game hunting in Africa for the 3rd time the next year and put a massive addition on his home. But that was okay. I could still work as in full-time the day after high school graduation. Work I did. Overtime was not given. That was for the employees, not the future owner. I improved systems, increased sales, handled the entire place when Dad would go hunting, fishing, traveling, or those numerous business meetings that smelled of beer and cigars afterwards. But that was okay. I was earning my right to the business. Work hard, and soon became the motto. 20 years go by. I am 32 at the time, and it's dang well time to take over the business, and he knows it. I was underpaid for 20 years, never had a real holiday, gave up university, sacrificed pretty well everything. and it was time. So Dad decided that weekend to talk to the competition, and he sells the business to them. Within 2 weeks, I was unemployed. He tells me, though, that he put in a good word in with the new owners and said I would still have a job. Then he paid me to the exact penny by a law what he owed me and complained it sure was a lot of money. Every time I bring it up, he tells me, "You were lucky to have a job. What are you complaining about all the time?" Oh, and the new owners? Never heard a word about hiring me. They had enough people, it seems. You need to cut that man out of your life for good. That's literally as shady and backstabbing as it gets. That was your own father who did it. And this is why when we go on interviews and the company says, "We like to treat people here like family," maybe you can whip out this story and tell them, "Is this the kind of family you want to treat us like?" Story 3. This happened about 2 weeks ago. A year ago, I started a wholesale company with my best friend while I was working for him at his retail B&M at the same time. We started off venturing into shops, making sales, and picking up accounts. We then began doing trade shows where we started landing distribution deals. I then started running Instagram marketing campaigns that was viewed by over 500,000 industry consumers and leaders. My campaign got us connected to distributors and retailers around the world. We somehow managed to become international businessmen overnight. Our products were being sold in countries like Malaysia, United Kingdom, Kuwait, Guam, Canada, and still growing very fast domestically. Our sales were tripling every month, and we were on track to clear $300K at the end of this year. We had 3 brands on the market. I was running all 3 Instagram pages, all 3 emails, doing the logistics of operations, filing orders, accounting, etc., etc. About 2 weeks ago, I got fired from my job. He said it was my work ethic, even though I was his number 2. The best, most efficient, and most trustworthy employee he had. He then split the company in half, 50-50. He had leverage to do this because the things he created were his and the brands I created were mine. 4 days after the split, the half of the company he got a 3,000-unit order, which adds up to be about $25,000. The people he got that order from was the accounts we got from my marketing campaign on Instagram. Throughout last week, the same brand he got started getting a lot of orders from the United Kingdom, from all the leads that I had been working on via Insta and Facebook. I have never been so used, so backstabbed, and or so messed over in my life, or however you want to put it. Although I didn't get the money and the satisfaction of first company being so successful, I've taken these past couple of days to really see life in a new perspective. I'm finishing my last 2 years in college, attaining my logistics degree, also studying business law so I know how to better protect myself. And so this will never, ever happen again. Well, from family we go to friends. Well, it was just awful. How did this guy get the leverage to fire the person he started the business with? Although he was number 2, was all the business in the other guy's name or something? Did he have no recourse to get any kind of compensation beyond this? It's a good thing he's taking precautions now. Story 4. This isn't the biggest by any means, but it's the most recent that happened to me. Before I switched jobs, there was a lead sales position open at my work that would have meant higher sales goals, but also lots more money and better flexibility. There were only 2 people in my branch that qualified, myself and another guy we'll call Frank. Frank and I were, and still are, really good friends, to the point that he's like a little brother to me. Note to future managers of the world, watch what you say to your employees about other employees. Frank and I played it close, and nobody realized what good friends we actually were, for the exact reason to come. One day, the regional supervisor shows up. Everyone groaned when we saw her pull into the parking lot because this woman is a fully loaded 0% APR four-door shrew. She comes in, makes her rounds to ensure we're all properly terrified of her presence, then calls me to the conference room. "Beard Forever, as you know, there's a sales lead position open, and you and Frank are the only qualified employees. I wanted to talk with you because I need to know if you're interested before we look for someone outside the company." What about Frank?
"Oh, I have no intention of even offering this job to Frank. I don't much care for him, and he won't do well in the position. It's yours if you want it."
I tell her I'll think about it. We chat about other unrelated work topics, and I leave. She follows me out the door and calls Frank in to chat. They talk. She leaves. After she left, Frank and I stepped outside for a smoke break. First thing he asks me, "What did Shrew have to say?" Turned out she told Frank the exact same thing she told me, word for word, outside switching names. Verbatim. Didn't even change up the script. I called her the next morning and turned down the position. When she asked why, I told her it was because I felt like the job would require me to do some douchey and backstabber things to my friends, and that I just couldn't be that sort of person. She got the hint.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.